So we're working on kefir 1, and we've already done the production budget and the income statement if we're assuming that only kefir will be produced. And now we're doing the next tab, which is called plus cheese, where we're going to do some kefir and some cheese. And the ratio of kefir to cheese is going to be based on what's in this cell here on the inputs page. So here, 13% of the cases will be converted to cheese, and on your project this might be some different percent, but the process will be the same. So the total number of cases, the capacity is going to begin with 30,000 and go up by 1%, but we're going to split that 30,000 into a ratio of 13% cheese with the remainder being just kefir. All right, so let's start the sales. It's very similar to the process that we did for the other one. So let's start here with the 30,000, and then we're going to go up by 1% or whatever's in this cell, and this right now it's 1%. And then we'll make it a how far out did I go here? Not too. Okay, so on this one I didn't go out the full year. The other one I did, and you could go out the full year, and you may wish to go out the full year in terms of prices. So kefir, the sales price is 30. Oh, some of these will be, let's fix this, times 1 minus whatever that sales mix cell is. All right, so if it's 13%, 1 minus 100% minus 13% will give you the percent that's going to go in here. So let's make that a I have to do the same thing here. 1 minus whatever's in that cell. We don't need the decimals there. Okay, let's make that an absolute reference. And still we want that. Let's see here, did I get that right? Okay, that should. All right. And then, okay, so get the sales. All right, now how many cases of cheese? So now this is going to be the 30,000 times. Now I don't have to do the 1 minus because 13% is the correct. So the total number of cases will be these two added up, which is the 30,000. But it's split into the 13% and the 100 minus the 13%, or the 87% in this particular case. And then the cheese, the sales price is 76. Okay, so then the total sales budget will be the cases of kefir times the sales price for kefir plus the cases of cheese times the sales price for cheese. See how we did that? So we can already see that the total sales is higher, so that's kind of exciting, except we know that the cost of the cheese is going to be higher as well. So that doesn't necessarily mean it will all translate into better profits, but we'll see. And then we want to do the same thing here, times the 1% times the percent that will be cheese. And get the absolute reference fixed. We don't need that. Okay. And we will need those cases for production. All right. So then the production budget is going to be the cases of kefir and the cases of cheese. And the desired ending is still going to be the desired rule from before, which is 5% of the following month. absolute reference. And then the fact that we went out some extra months is helpful here. And then what we need is what we're going to sell plus a little cushion, and we can back out the cases that we have on hand, which is still this. All right. So this pattern still looks very similar because, let's fix that. The number of cases we produce, it's still in total the same. It's just it's going to be split between the two. So for the production, we didn't have to split, but for sales, we did because each case is not being sold at the same sales price. All right, and so gallons needed for production. We need 3 gallons of milk, whether it's kefir or cheese. There's not a difference there. So gallons needed for production. If we're going to produce this many, it'll have to be times 3 gallons. All right, and let's make that an absolute reference. All right. And then we need to have on hand how many gallons? 1% of next month. So that's how many gallons we'll need, and we have some gallons on hand just like before. Okay, very good. So this looks very similar here because the materials needed for kefir and cheese are the same. The difference is just that cheese ferments longer. All right, so let's put the absolute references in here, just like we did in the first video. So this should all be very familiar. So the materials are the same. The sales mix didn't change that. But the labor is different. The labor for cheese, because you have to do something with the kefir in order to have it ferment a little longer and press it into cheese, there is a different labor requirement, even though there isn't a different materials requirement. So for kefir, we're going to produce this many cases, and that's going to require, labor per case was 0.4, I think, on this one. And so the cheese cases require something different. They require more labor, so that's a different labor. And so the total labor hours will be kefir times the time for kefir plus cases times the how long it takes to make the cheese. So different labor hours than we had before because cheese takes more labor. It doesn't take more milk, it takes more labor. Okay, and so do we need to anchor anything? Yes. Get the absolute references there. And of course, if I forgot, I'd get zeros and it would remind me when I copied everything over. All right, and the labor cost per hour is the same regardless of whether they're working on kefir or cheese. And so the labor budget, there we go. All right, and then the labor hours we've calculated, and then the other variable labor per labor hour. So this is very similar to what we did in the first video, except the labor hours are different now because we've got labor for cheese. And then the packing supplies are different between kefir and cheese. So you can see we have to pay attention. So that's a little bit different in this one. So the packing supplies per case of kefir were $2.10, and then we produced that many cases. And then the packing supplies for cheese is higher. There's more packing supplies for the cheese. All right, and so how many cases of cheese are we going to make? And so now the packaging cost will be the price for kefir times cases of kefir plus the price for cheese times the cases for cheese. So the packaging cost now is much higher than it was before because now we have this $4.10 for some of the cases, whereas before all the cases were at the $2.10. Fixed overhead is the same regardless because it takes care of capacity. So the overhead is going to be that variable overhead plus this new packaging cost plus the fixed for the month. All right, let's see, did we anchor everything down here that we needed to? Okay, so let's see if any of these things turn out to be zeros because I left one out. No, looks good. Okay, so that seems like a good place to stop and see how that looks.